Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Tuesday, October 29th, 2024. Colonel Douglas Macgregor will be here with us in a moment to talk about Israel and whether the Israeli leadership is having second thoughts about attacking Iran and moving up into Lebanon. Colonel Macgregor, welcome here. Welcome here, my friend. Thank you very much for your time. I'd like to explore your thoughts in some detail on Israel, but before we do to Ukraine, there is some breaking news. However, Russian troops, according to President Putin himself at the BRICS summit in Kazan, have totally surrounded, you may have told us this a while ago, but now President Putin's acknowledging it, the troops that were engaged in the incursion, apparently some were Americans, in Kursk, and Russian, the main part of the Russian military, we understand, continues to move westward. What does this tell you? How much longer, no matter what the outcome of the election in America is next week, how much longer can Ukraine survive?
Well, you know, that question is asked almost every week to everyone. And we always say essentially the same thing. As long as we continue to pump money into the governmental facade with Zelensky and his cabinet, as well as the senior leadership of the military, I guess they'll continue to pretend that they're actually fighting and have a chance to win the war. I mean, obviously that the war is finished. They're not going to win, not now, not ever. Russia has essentially crushed the resistance. But as long as they can find someone to go out there with a weapon and they can pay them, people will go. It's tragic.
So, Colonel, just about an hour ago, the Russian military spokesperson announced that an ex-Marine operating under an ex-American Marine, ex-American Special Forces operating under a Ukrainian flag was killed by Russian forces. They've identified this young man as Corey John Nawrocki, Nawrocki. There are pictures of the American military equipment found with him. There's his body, or a portion of the body, just the arm and the armpit, showing tattoos. Do those tattoos indicate to you that it's more likely than not that this person is an American ex-military?
Well, he's got a tattoo that says he was in the 75th Ranger Regiment. I don't know what the Marine connection is. It's not impossible that he could have served in the Marines and also the Army at some point. And I think this is probably genuine. It's tragic. He has what sounds like a Polish or potentially Ukrainian name, but I think probably Polish. And perhaps he was among many of the Special Operations Forces volunteers, people that had formerly served who were no longer on active duty, that were recruited to go over and fight for Ukraine. And I imagine that's how he ended up where he is.
Is there some prohibition on veterans fighting under the flag of a foreign country, even one supported by the United States?
Well, we had laws on the books about those things, but we have on the whole tended to turn a blind eye. We had the so-called Abraham Lincoln Brigade, which consisted of communists, American communists, who went to Spain during the Civil War to fight for the communist side, which was called itself Republicans, but they were actually a mix of communists, socialists, anarchists. Most of those men came back, and I don't know that their citizenship was revoked, although given the laws that were on the books at the time, they could have had their citizenship revoked. I guess we decided not to do it. And of course, we have many Americans who serve in the Israeli Defense Force. And once again, if you serve under a foreign flag or you vote in a foreign election, you can have your citizenship withdrawn. I wish we would enforce those laws, because I don't think American citizens should engage in this sort of behavior.
We had an American, Matt Van Dyke, who came on the show on a regular basis, was very proud of the fact that he was wearing a Ukrainian uniform and fighting under a Ukrainian flag, and then he disappeared. I understand he's still alive, but he's no longer doing podcasts. Colonel, what do we know about the North Korean troops in Russia? Is it the case that North Koreans have for a long time trained in the far eastern part of Russia, where Russia and North Korea have a common border? Is it nothing more than that? Or have North Korean troops, as far as your sources are able to tell you, actually been transported to the area of the conflagration between Russia and Ukraine?
As far as I know, the answer to the second question is no. Clearly, the North Koreans have a long history with Russia. The North Korean forces that attacked us in 1950 were essentially trained, equipped, and put into action by Russian officers, Soviet officers at the time. This was Stalin's plan to rapidly overrun the peninsula. It almost worked, obviously. But other than that, the Koreans have not directly participated in events in Eastern Europe. Now, there were Koreans and Mongolians and Tartars in the Waffen-SS of the German Wehrmacht. There were also many inside the Soviet army. But the Koreans I'm talking about were people that already lived in Russia. The Koreans that we're discussing today from North Korea have been in Russia to be trained. That's all. There is no evidence. I can't find any evidence. I've talked to everybody I know. We see no evidence for any sort of Korean military force anywhere near Ukraine. And we don't understand what this is other than a false flag. It strikes me as this is an effort to try and somehow or another resuscitate resistance to the Russians in eastern Ukraine on the basis of this lie that North Korean forces are going to help invade Eastern Europe. It's all nonsense.
You know, there's a Reuters report out this morning saying that there are leaks out of the Defense Department that if North Korean troops show up and fire at Ukrainian troops, then the president will authorize Ukraine to use American offensive weaponry as deep as they want to inside of Russia. Does this make sense to you?
No, because it's a lie. And the Pentagon knows that we're not going to see any North Korean troops in Ukraine. The Russians don't need them there. If you look at the language barrier and all sorts of things, there's no reason for it. It doesn't make any sense at all. But it certainly serves the purpose of trying to reinforce the big lie that what happens in eastern Ukraine threatens everyone in NATO. It does not. It certainly doesn't threaten us. But I think the lie might be pandered or promoted in order to justify letting the Ukrainians fire long-range strike weapons into Russia. I hope not, because I think it's been made very clear by President Putin that if we do that, he will consider us and everyone associated with Ukraine as a co-belligerent. So I hope we are not going to do that. Seriously hope we're not.
Here's President Putin, Colonel, on Friday responding to a question from an American reporter. This is at the very end of the BRICS conference in Kazan, and he says exactly what you just referenced. Chris, cut number 1.
Satellite images are said to show North Korean troops here in Russia. What are they doing here? And wouldn't that be a massive escalation in the Ukraine war?
Now, as for our interaction relationship with the North Korea, we ratified our treaty on strategic partnership, which contains Article 4, and we have never doubted the fact that North Korean leadership is very serious about their commitments to us and engagement with that. But as for how we do and what we do, it's up to us to decide under Article 4 of this treaty. First, we need to hold the relevant talks about implementing Article 4 of the Treaty on Strategic Partnership with North Korea. We're in contact with our friends from North Korea. We'll see how this process develops. That said, the Russian armed troops are moving forward very steadily. No one can contradict that. It's moving forth at all the parts of the line of contact.
Seem to make sense to you?
Of course. There are agreements in place. What specifically is stated in those agreements, I don't know. But keep something in mind. North Korea is very dependent upon Russia for all sorts of reasons. It's otherwise largely friendless. The Chinese absolutely detest North Korea. Xi in Beijing would love to get rid of it, which is why he was willing to push Donald Trump's plan to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula when he did. And that's why he told Kim from North Korea to go to Hanoi and sign the agreement. Tragically, we missed the opportunity. We could have had a denuclearized and ultimately neutral Korean Peninsula, which would have been a good thing for everybody involved and removed the danger of serious war.
Right.
Well, here we sit. Nothing's changed. Now we're trying to make the argument that the North Koreans are being asked to come in and do something. They're not. The Russians don't need their help. But I am quite sure that the North Koreans would love to join the war. They would love to send their forces there. There's no question about it. And we're very happy that kind of enthusiasm exists, because we would like to involve the Republic of Korea in any way we can in NATO, which, of course, from the vantage point of most people in South Korea, is ridiculous. But we are always in the business of trying to globalize our alliances. Russia is not. And there will be no Koreans on the battlefield in Ukraine. I can say that with considerable confidence.